How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Dave?
I'm doing awesome. Happy Monday.
Hey, I love your operations center back there. It looks pretty sharp. Is that really your where you are right now, or is that a
No,
background?
it's background. One of my new favorites. I try to change it up a lot, so we'll see.
Nice, nice, loving it. So,
Thanks.
why don't you tell me a little bit about your organization, where you're from, and let's go from there.
Yeah, so I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Growth Acceleration Partners. We're based in Austin, Texas. At GAP, our mission is to help our clients scale smarter. So we engage with customers in the areas of all areas of software lifecycle, everything from strategic advisory and architecture to DevOps to software development slash implementation. Um, Also, a very agile centered engineering company, and we partner with clients who can't afford, can't find, or can't keep the engineering talent that they need to be successful.
Very cool, very cool. So, where in Austin are you guys located?
We're near the Arboretum, actually.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
that, that is corporate headquarters, although I'm based down on the coast in Rockport, Texas.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I have a place in at Circle C Ranch in the southwest corner of
Yep,
Austin.
yep.
Yeah.
I lived in Austin for almost 3 decades. So I just recently in August moved down to the coast full time.
Oh, nice, nice. It's a great town. Love visiting there.
Yes, it is. Yep.
So you tell me that you've come across a lot of failures to innovate in your career. I mean, tell me a little bit about those.
Well, I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. I've been around for I'm in the latter stages of my career. I'm not fooling anybody, but I've seen a lot of cases where it worked, but many more where it didn't work and people were striving for it. And so one of the things that I try to focus on is creating a culture that supports failure because without failure we have no innovation. I don't know of anybody that's so smart they get everything right first time every time, and
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
there's going to be failures along the way. And then I typically see four kind of tiers of failure acceptance. One is it's not accepted, and so failures lead to dismissals or working on projects that you don't want to work on and doing some things that nobody else wants to do. That's the there's no acceptance of it. And then tier
Pretty
two,
typical, right? You finding that as most people, or
and then tier two is it's tolerated, which is a little bit better than that, but you won't necessarily get fired for failing. And we know that you're human and it's par for the course, but we tolerate it. Yeah, we get it. And then three is embracing it. And like for us to achieve some of these innovations that we're trying to do, either through our product or our service or some of the processes, we actually have to embrace the fact that we're going to fail a good percentage of the time in order for us to achieve it. So that's a healthy place to be on the spectrum. And then the last one, the furthest one, which I tend to favor the most, is failure is celebrated. And the difference with that one is failures are communicated to the wider organization as a way of achieving the results that were necessary along the way. And it could be like, we didn't achieve what we set out to achieve, but look at all these ways that we proved not to do something.
yeah,
Or look at this other thing that stemmed from the fact that we failed here. Way to go, team, on that failure, right? The healthiest organizations and the most innovative, in my opinion, are the ones that actually celebrate it.
yeah. It's like the old Edison quote, right? I found 100 ways or 1,000 ways and it didn't work. These aren't
Yes.
failures; these are just ways it didn't work.
Yes, and the hard part, Chris, is I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up in an environment that stressed failure is good, right? And so
Right.
we're kind of groomed our whole childhood to like try to succeed in everything and to bounce back from failure, and to not necessarily expect it. I saw this one person, I forget her actual role, but she was talking about she was in a very innovative role, and she had a really good track record of some stellar stuff. And that she said that the key to her mindset around innovation was growing up, her dad would ask her, I want to hear 3 ways that you failed this week. And you better have at least 3. And if you didn't have 3, then you weren't trying enough things. Like that always stuck with me, and I believe that's the root of my thinking now in my work, in the role that I'm in. So I love that.
Yeah, it's the did you win or did you learn? Not did you win or did you fail, right? Did you win or did you lose? Did you win or did you learn? Right? Is
Yep.
that kind of philosophy? Because every failure is a learning experience, right?
That's right. Every failure is a learning experience, and some are easier to recover from than others, but they are all learning experiences.
So in your career, would you say that of the 4 types of attitudes towards failure, I'm guessing you're thinking that number 1 is prevalent. At least I've seen that as number 1 is prevalent. What about you?
Number 1 is as in there's no tolerance for failure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's most prevalent, and it's unfortunate, and I see it a lot. And I guess the only thing I say to that is kind of be the change that you want to see, and to be able to communicate and articulate to the senior leadership on why that a change in culture or organization or process would be beneficial for them, and to be able to do that in a way that's non-threatening that they actually get. And some do, some don't, and that's okay.
So you must have you seen companies sort of transition from state 1 to like through to state 4 or somewhere through? And then what sort of triggers them to make those kinds of transitions?
I think that one of the things that is making it easier is some of the technology advances that we have. So, for instance, I worked in the gaming industry for over a decade, and the first game that I worked on, which was Star Wars: The Old Republic, when it launched, it had servers
That's a
distributed.
great game, by the way. That's a great game.
Yes, it is still going strong. When it launched initially, we had servers distributed around the world to support the player populations, right? So going up to that launch point, we had to make decisions on hardware, on how we're going to run our game servers and the profile of those machine specs, right? Well, if you got that wrong, that was a pretty serious mistake, right?
Yeah.
So nowadays, with the public cloud providers and choosing instance types, you try one, we need more CPU, or we need more RAM, or we need more this, we need more that. And another, you can try another one in a few minutes, or you can swap from one to another one in production if you wanted to. And so the odds of, or the ability to make mistakes and to have that part of the process and to be able to spin off of those and to adjust and to pivot is so much easier given some of these technological advances.
Well, I did some work with EA back in 2005. Would you say that EA fits into that? Which one of these categories do you think EA fits into?
Well, you have EA, and then you have the publishers, where you have the actual studios where the games are made. So EA is, I would say, they're tolerant, and then at the studios, I would say they're much more celebratory of failures. I mean, make it a commercially successful and critically acclaimed game is like really hard to do. And then for anybody that does it, one of our favorite things that we would say is do it again. And we'll see how good you really are, right? So even some very popular games and studios today, and whether or not they're EA or not, they typically have a single flagship game, and then they have really deep pockets, and they try to create other games, and they fail repeatedly because it's a combination of luck and timing and the stars aligning and things that just happened that made it work. And then they try to reproduce that, and they have a difficult time. But I would say EA is on the tolerant side, but the studios that make the games are much more on the celebrate.
Yeah, it's probably it's probably more difficult to build an award-winning game than it is to do a film, right? I mean, there's just so much more involved in doing that, isn't it?
Yes, and one of the things that I think, and when we talk about innovation, this is one of my favorite examples. If you look at building a AAA title, on average, it's like a 7-year effort. Hundreds of people for 7 years and a lot of money, right? And
Mhm.
so last time I checked, it didn't take a movie that long to make it. And so when you set out with this vision of here's what the game's going to be, what are the odds that 7 years from now it's going to hit the mark, right? Other games are going to come up and you're not going to be like that one, and that one's really taken off, and maybe we should make adjustments to our vision. So it's going as it's trying to get to its North Star, but at the same time, it has all these interruptions along the way. And I think the biggest challenge to that is it takes you 7 years.
Yeah.
Well, what if we could take it from 7 years to 4? I think our odds of success would be, a lot better. What if we go 7 years to 2? Wow, much better chance of hitting the mark. But it's such a complicated thing with so many disciplines, from engineering to artists to game designers to musicians, just this whole symphony of different skill sets come together to create this thing, which is an amazing experience.
Well, I can't imagine. I can't imagine anything taking 7 years anymore, because it's like the world is completely different from one year to the next. How could you possibly even imagine a game that's coming 7 years away? It's almost impossible. You have no idea if the technology is going to be there, or the market's going to be there, or anything that you started off with, right?
Yeah, very difficult indeed, and that's one of the reasons why some of the big manufacturers, the big game makers, they fail to produce hits over and over. So they have a big one and they try to do it again, and it misses the mark. The only other industry I can think where they have those long life cycles is like big pharma or
Mhm.
drug research, but in those cases it's the same disease that was here 7 years ago.
That's right.
Uh, Versus a game that is maybe not as popular, or the things that you thought were going to be a hit people don't care about, or somebody came out with something new that's a lot better, and all those challenges that you have with the gaming.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for Beyond Good and Evil too. I mean, when's that coming out? That's Ubisoft, of course, but
You know what? I will say this about the gaming community is that we're all fans of each other, and
yeah,
that any game by anybody is played by all the gamers. And so
yeah,
there's like, we're rooting for each other to make something awesome that we all want to play, regardless of who's
exactly right. So have you found that so I mean, you've worked in various industries, right, outside of the gaming industry as well. Do you find there's particular industries that are more or less tolerant? Like, it depends on which industry that you're in.
Sure. I think that, well, a lot of the Gap specifically has been targeting verticals in the fintech and telehealth. There's certain industries that, although the margin for error is, less, to actually create environments where you can kind of have that exploratory stuff where you can fail. I mean, nobody wants their 747 pilot over the middle of the Atlantic Ocean say, hold on, I'm going to try something new here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, in the simulator is where, sparks fly and good things happen, and maybe they find some advancement. So in those types of like really critical around, medical or healthcare, or even financials, to create environments where you can have that true R&D where you can fail repeatedly is important.
Do you find that it helps to have some like a design thinking approach where you're pulling the customer into the innovation conversation? Does that actually does that happen more often? I'm assuming that happens more often in the more failure tolerant companies.
Absolutely. The design thinking approach is the way to go. And in my opinion, the ones that are failing around innovation are the ones that are typically coming up with a technology point of view or perspective, instead of focusing more on that design style and thinking about the business problem. And there may be a technology play in the solution, or there may not be. It might be simply, process or culture, or a combination of a new process with technology, or applying technology in different ways using the same technology that we have. But the ones that I see the most successful really drill in on what is the business problem we're trying to solve here. And I'll give you an example of a recent customer. Um, for them to get a new customer on the platform that they have, was between 10 months and a year. Well, their competitors with similar products, it would be 2 to 3 months. And so without any focus on technology whatsoever, to be able to have the discussion and to have their leaders point a picture of why we can't stay here. Does everybody agree that for us to be competitive, we can't take 12 months and them take 2? And then have the discussion on like, how do we get down to 2 months? And in that case, it was a combination of internal policies and culture and process combined with technology that they were considering that would actually help expedite that process. But perfect example.
Right. So when you say, you were talking about how when you're moving from one stage to another, because the companies, I'm assuming, do move from one stage to another, how do you trigger that? I mean, what kind of things need to be in place for that kind of movement from sort of not accepted to celebrated?
Yeah, that's a good one, Chris. I think our conversation's over. I don't know. I mean, that's a tough one there. But let me say this. I mean, having the particular stages and evolving from one to the next is a difficult challenge. But I also think it's an important point is that for companies that are able to pull this off, it's not so much we have developed an innovation lab, or this is the team responsible for our future, so good luck to these people, and that's where they're going to innovate and start the sparks flying over there. Those typically don't work, and the ones that do work are where we want to create a culture of innovation in everything that we do. We want people to challenge things. We want people to fail in the right environments. We don't want to fire people for making what we consider a mistake with effort. Those types of things take a while, especially if the culture has not been that way. Obviously easier to do in a startup than it is in a large company that has not really honored those principles. And so that's always a challenge. But in my experience, if they can start with a pocket or a new team or a project and start practicing some of those things and being the change that they want to see throughout the rest of the company, and it starts working out as a grassroots type operation, and people want to be a part of something exciting. And if they can communicate that, and as a human being, I don't know about you, but I would love to work on teams that I'm like, I don't get penalized for failing. I get applauded, and if anything comes of that, it's even better. I mean, who wouldn't want to work on a team like that? And so when you start talking about the war on talent and trying to retain really strong skills, having cultures like that are the key, because these things come and go, these technologies, and you might say, oh, we need 3 Kubernetes experts, and then they get them and they're very expensive and then they leave. But what can you do to create a culture around the things that are important to you that makes them want to stay? So that's the hard part.
Sorry, I'm not sure why my background changed. That's very strange.
Good change. I have a quick metaphor for you on or analogy on a mistake with effort. It's one of my favorites. I don't know if you're a baseball guy, but let's say that you have a routine grounder that is hit to the shortstop, and he deflects it and it goes under his legs as an error, E6. Another play, a different shortstop, sharp grounder is hit to his left. He takes 5 steps, lays out completely horizontal, knocks the ball down, gets up, and airmails it over the first baseman's head. Both of those are in the books as an error on the shortstop. One of those is applauded, as it should be, and the other is like, no, this is something that we don't, that was a mistake, right? But statistically, they are the exact same thing in the book, but they are vastly different in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So it's interesting that you mentioned grassroots innovation there, because I find that in most of these companies where you actually do see that kind of culture change, you really do need somebody in leadership who understands that and goes, okay, I'm gonna put this in place and I'm gonna make it happen. Even then, it doesn't necessarily happen. I mean, you got to have, I think you have to have it coming from both directions. You have to have it coming from the leadership, and you also have to have it coming from the grassroots. Otherwise, the culture doesn't change.
I couldn't agree more. You know, I'm a big fan of Innovation Lab Excellence by Richard Turin. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a go-to resource of mine. However, I think you could have a stack of those and hand them out. And I'm not sure that without the right leaders, it's going to make the difference in the success of those teams that it probably should. But in my experience, to have it comes down to leadership to start. To have someone that can inspire a team to point the direction of the North Star and articulate it in a way that is inspiring, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself as long as you have a good team of talented people that everybody wants to make a difference and do something awesome. But in my opinion, it starts with that leader.
And have you actually seen that sort of happen? Because it almost seems to me that in a lot of these organizations that at least I've worked with, is that they seem to go through a cycle, right? They talk a big game, they bring in an innovation group, they staff up like crazy. They actually, within that group, they're okay with failure, and they just keep churning, but then it never seems to spread to the other groups. And then eventually, after about 2 or 3 years, the rest of leadership says, well, you guys aren't really producing anything. And then they cut the group. And then there's a period of time where nothing's happening. And then new leadership comes in and it starts all over again. I mean, have you seen that sort of cycle?
I've seen it a lot, and I've read Richard talk about it in his book. It's a very common thing. And there's many reasons for that. One is, not focusing on ROI and giving like carte blanche on like, you guys go innovate and cool things will happen. But to not have at least some kind of mission on like what we're trying to solve here, that's one. And I think that I see that a lot. I know in my current job as Chief Innovation Officer, I am held accountable for our innovation portfolio. And believe me, I have to answer every week to, are we on track for that? And what is going to be the return on that? And having an answer of I don't know is not going to be good for me. So they give me some constraints, which are good because that enables the trackability of it and the monitoring of it to know if we're on the right track and if we need to make adjustments or not. And the example you were using, I see that a lot where they don't have enough structure around it. It's too loose. And as a result, it's difficult to track and it fails. And then people are like, what are we supposed to be doing here? I'm not sure. And I'll work on this and you work on that. Maybe one of these things will be awesome. And they just lack focus.
Yeah, exactly. And then I've seen these situations where it's just like innovation theater, right? They're doing a lot of things that appear to be innovative, right? They've got labs, they have a lot of toys that they play with. They have drones, they have AI, they have VR glasses and stuff like that. And all this stuff, they collect all these toys and they create videos and create content showing how innovative they actually are. But when it comes right down to it, absolutely zero products come out of that group. Have you seen that happen a lot as well?
I've seen that happen a lot as well, and my colleague at Gap has a word for that or a definition of that, which I've used a lot. And he's like he refers to that as we have a lot of motion and no movement, and that's exactly what it is. You got
Yeah.
a lot of motion, but no real movement. How do we get movement? And that goes back to some of the leadership stuff where I think the biggest or the most common way to fail at anything is through a lack of clarity. So as a leader, if I do nothing else, be clear. And that clarity might have, different ranges, of course, but at least the people that we're trying to solve a problem, let's be very clear about what we're trying to do. And in the case of the customer I mentioned earlier, it's pretty clear we can't take 12 months on board a customer. We got to get that down. What do we got to do that? Is everybody clear about that? Yes. But I think a lot of organizations lack that clarity and they think they're doing, some cool invention stuff that never materializes into anything.
Well, what kind of level of vision do you think? I mean, I totally agree that there has to be some kind of a vision out there and then sort of let people run with it because that's where the innovation comes from is like what they come up with underneath that vision. What kind of level of detail of a vision do you need to provide for people to run towards?
Yep, I think it depends on the type of problem you're solving. In the case of the onboarding of a customer, I think that The people that have been doing it for years have a pretty good idea of the process and where it gets hung up. And so I would be a little reluctant to offer a lot of injection points there, instead of letting the game come to me, so to speak. In other cases, you as a leader, you don't necessarily know the answer. That's the exciting part, right? I had no idea how Star Wars: The Old Republic was going to turn out. We didn't know, and so to be able to still point in that direction, not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but to have the type of team and the support that they need around that messaging and clarity is critical. I will say that another example of that is in my enterprise software days, where this is a quick story about innovation and leadership combined, because in many cases I think they're interwoven. We had a competitor who was eating our lunch. They had a very awesome product, and what we called then with time to benefit was dramatically shorter than ours. And the product was called Spotlight, and it was by a company called Quest Software. And this is decades ago. And so the vice president called me into his office, and he said, I got two words for you: beat Spotlight. Now run along. And I was like, got it. And he's like, let me know what resources you need, but we got to beat Spotlight. And that's all that it took. So I think he demonstrated trust in me. He knew that he had a team that he bet on delivering that, right? But at the same time, did he have any idea what would beat Spotlight? Nope.
Yep.
But that to me, and here it is decades ago, and I still get chills thinking about it, because it was one of what I consider the best examples of leadership that had motivated me and my team, and we had a good time beating Spotlight.
Did you actually beat them?
Well, that's debatable. I think it's hard to beat someone that has a success in the market for a while with a cult-like following, and you're coming out with a new thing, and you're the newcomer. But yeah, we took a completely different approach to it, solving the same problem. And the only thing that I asked of my team of engineers was, at the start of this, you're not allowed to look at Spotlight. So otherwise, we're a me too and a copycat and a wannabe, and it's easy for that to happen when you intensely analyze a competitive product. So here's the problem we're trying to solve. What is the best way to solve it? And we'll see how we stack up on that later. But we did pretty good.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You have to completely ignore your competitors and go, where are you trying to get to? What's my goal? And just, you're not going to take the same route, because you're going to the same place, but you're taking a completely different route. You have to focus on the goal and not what your competitors are doing. I have a very similar story like that. When I worked for Citibank, I ran the innovation group there for about a year, and I got the same kind of edict. I talked to my leader, brings me into the office, and says, build a PayPal killer. I'm like, okay, that's it, right? Great. So we set off to build a PayPal killer, and we built, a prototype of a PayPal killer. And then they said, oh no, we decided against it. We're not going to do that. And it ended up being all innovation theater from top to bottom. But at least yours is actually, I'm assuming yours got into the marketplace?
Oh yes, it did. It got in the marketplace. It did well. It lasted, this was at BMC Software. It lasted till I left the company and beyond. So I felt very good about that. But it's interesting that your little story there, because I think that we have a lot of herd mentality, not just in technology, but in life as human beings, is that, hey, if somebody can solve this problem for me or has before, well, I'll just follow them. Well, I'm guilty of that. If I think I can fix anything around the house by looking at YouTube. Right, and as a result, I've probably almost electrocuted myself a few times. But there, especially in tech, with CTOs and CIOs, there are so many options these days with open source, cloud providers, and cloud native, that I put myself in their shoes, and it's overwhelming. So they want help. So it's easy for them to fall into the trap of, I'm just going to I'm just going to follow that because I don't even know if it's the right thing for my team or my company. But it's been quite a challenge. My favorite analogy to that is I'm a saltwater fisherman. And if I were to take my boat into the middle of the bay and anchor it, and let's just say it's the worst place to fish and there's never been a fish there for this example. If I were to anchor my boat and get a line wet, within 15 minutes, there'll be another boat there. Well, once there are two boats there, wisdom of crowds, right? Once there are two boats there, in 30 minutes, we'll have 6. In an hour, we'll have 15, all following the guy that didn't know what he was doing. And the same thing is happening in tech. They'll read the blog posts about, Kubernetes or this or that, and they just hop on that train. And then when I would ask them questions like, why do you think Kubernetes is the right thing for this? Not sure, and then let's do the right thing for you. It might be Kubernetes, it might not be, but it's going to be the right thing for you and your team and your company and the thing you're trying to build. And those are very fruitful conversations.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me that, I keep thinking about crowdsourcing, and everyone thinks crowdsourcing and crowd this and crowd that are so great, but what if the crowd is wrong, right? The crowd isn't necessarily right? Like you say in that example, if it's a perfect example. And the whole thing about the PayPal killer is that they were looking backwards, right? They were looking backwards at what was already here, not what should be here, right? They should be looking forward at what the customer is looking for, not build a PayPal killer. It's like, what are our customers looking for in transactions? What do they want to do when it comes to transactions, right? They're not even thinking about that piece of it. They're just sort of looking backwards at what's already there and just trying to match that or defeat that. But it seems that, from my perspective, that's the easy way out. It's kind of like when a leader first comes into a company, the first thing they do is cut, because they know cutting is easy to do.
Yep.
It's easier to cut than it is to grow. So it seems like that's what a lot of it is. And the term low-hanging fruit, man, if I ever heard that, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said the word low-hanging fruit, but the problem is the only fruit anybody ever goes after is the low-hanging stuff, right? So how do you get people to go after the higher up fruit?
So let me ask you this, Chris, going back to your Citibank days, where do you see the sweet spot between somebody that's pretty visionary, that says, okay, this is what I want to do, and this is like, within certain constraints, this is what I want us to do, versus those that are more customer driven, that are trying to do what the customer wants. But many of the most serious or blockbuster innovations, the customers didn't decide, right? It was someone that said, here's what we're going to do. And so where do you see that balance being, or which ones do you tend to favor?
Well, it has to lean more towards what the customer is looking for. And I think this is where a lot of financial services companies do fail, especially the traditional ones, because they consider themselves banks, right? They consider themselves, I'm a bank and I'm trapped by all this regulation, right? So they don't want to step out of that space. But the customer doesn't want them to be a bank. It's like, for example, you have a situation where they go, oh, we have to figure out a better way of doing mortgages, or we have to figure out a better way of doing bill pay, or we have to figure out a better way of doing bill presentment. And the customer's like, I just want to own a home. I just want to have money in my pocket. It's like the disconnect is immense. It's immense. And the bank won't go here because they're just like, oh, we're just a bank. And the customer doesn't want to go here because they've been forced to go here all this time. It's really up to the banks and the financial services, well, all of these companies, to say, I want to get closer to what my customer is actually looking for, as opposed to just giving them the tools to do what they need to do in the context of me.
I got it. That makes a lot of sense. I echo that sentiment.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think they're not the only ones. It's kind of like, pretty much everybody. It's like, do you know the pop socket story, where the guy who came up with the pop sockets, he actually had, his problem was headphones, right? His headphones kept getting tangled. So he created this thing, he stuck it on the back of his phone, and there was actually 2 pop sockets, and he would pull them out and he'd wrap his cord around it. And then he took it and he was just about to go to market, and he said, well, let me give it to a bunch of friends and family, see what they do with it. He gave it to them, give them any instruction other than, this is what I do with it. 2 weeks later, they came back to him and said, we're using it as a stand. right? And a holder and a stand. They're not even using it for the original purpose. So he pivoted. And I think that's the biggest problem with a lot of these companies, especially the larger, more traditional ones. They're all saying, well, this is me. This is like, it's like they've got stuck in their own identities, and they don't see how their identity is sort of like anathema to what the customer is looking for. So they need to break out of their own identities and go closer to what the customer needs.
I agree. I think my favorite recent story is the Slack story. You know, here they were, you know, trying to build video games and didn't make it. And then when the investors came looking for any type of assets, they said, we have this collaboration tool we use on our teams, and Slack is born and worth more than any gaming company right now. So that's just unbelievable.
You know what I find funny is that I actually met Stuart Butterfield because I worked at Yahoo at the same time, right after Flickr got bought by Yahoo. And it seems like he's always trying to make a game. It's because Flickr was supposedly a game, and then Slack was supposedly a game. So it's like, I wonder if he's ever going to get lucky creating an actual game, or it's always like the ancillary thing that he creates.
You're right. He's probably still trying to make a game now because that's what he wants to do. But which is another testament for how hard it is to make a game. He's a pretty talented guy with a talented team of engineers, and you know that's hard.
Exactly, but it's a perfect example of pivoting too, right? I mean, if you see, you create something, and if a portion of it is what the market wants, you pivot to what the market it's looking for, and boom, you know, you're successful. So that's great. But a lot of these companies, they don't see that. They're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, and that's it, right? Actually, I wanted to go back to a point you made earlier about ROI. ROI is the toughest thing when it comes to innovation, right? I mean, what kind of ROI are you using, or are you seeing being used that works well?
Well, that's I don't know if I've seen it working well lately, but I think in the case of innovative products, it's more black and white, right? So in my role, excuse me, I'm working on a portfolio of some products that we're going to offer to the market. They're going to be in this category of newness and my responsibility, working with my team at Gap. So in that case, it's pretty black and white. How are these offerings doing in the marketplace that we thought were going to be hits with our customers, right? In the case of customers I work with, unless it's like directly related to something that is measurable, and in many cases they're not good, they don't have good measurements in place for any of the stuff now, to be able to measure that is difficult. And I'll be honest with you, in some cases that measurement equals accountability, so you have some reluctance there, and there's that I like this gray area where I can say things are going well and we move on. So that's a hard one. But for the ones that do have ROI for products or services or stuff like that, and they've made changes to it, much easier.
That's interesting, because I never thought of the accountability aspect of it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the less accountable they are, then the less, you know, if they say that, oh, I'm gonna produce this many widgets or these many proofs of concept, if I didn't get to that point, then I feel like I've lost something. But they don't want that level of accountability, because they say, well, it's not, you know, if you're maybe it should be numbers of failures, right? Based on your original thought. It's like, maybe you should.
Yes. How many times did you fail this week, and what did you learn from that? Something that is measurable that can be used to gauge your progress. And in the case of Gap, I'm no expert in this because I'm new to it since I've been at Gap, but we're adopters of traction. And so we have, you know, really strong goals and rocks and ROI tracking that is built into our process as a company. So I'm still getting used to it, but it is a little uncomfortable because there is full accountability, as there should be.
Well, so Gap is retail, right? So that must be super tough.
No, you're thinking of the retailer, but for us, it's Growth Acceleration Partners, which is.
Oh, okay. And your customers are mostly financial services and healthcare, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We have customers outside of that, but those are our two verticals that we tend to favor.
Okay. And so you're developing work for your financial services clients. I mean, they must have the same kind of regulatory issues, or are these fintech and they're outside of the regulatory bubbles?
No, they are inside the regulatory bubbles, and the
Okay.
same with the telehealth stuff. I mean, I've had to recently learn a bunch of things like HL7 and high trust certification and FHIR, more healthcare information than I ever thought I'd learn in my career, to be able to understand some of the challenges that they have before I could have any kind of insightful recommendation. It was critical.
Right. Right. So how do you like stay, how do you innovate within these bubbles? Do you have to just be very, very careful that you don't step outside of regulation, or do you just innovate like crazy and then apply the regulation on top?
Well, it depends. In some of our clients, the innovation might be a case of going from on-prem monolithic applications to more of a nimble cloud-native serverless approach that would give them the ability to update their telehealth app multiple times a day instead of once a month type thing. So all those health regulations are still in play, and it's good to know about them, but we're kind of in there doing the things that we do that are our core competencies around technology implementation and advisory that are helping them.
Hmm. Very cool. Very cool. So let me ask you a little bit about where you think things are going. So it's 2031.
Yep.
And you're in the same space, or you're like, what space? What do you think the world is going to be like in 2031? What do you think your industry is going to be like? What do you think your customer is going to be like 10 years from now?
Wow. So let's talk about a couple of things here. One, I don't think this work from home trend is going away.
Yep.
So at least I don't think it's going to be in my career. So this war on talent has now got no real borders. And so our core business is the nearshore model. So our engineering teams are in Costa Rica and Colombia. And so things that were maybe hurdles for some companies, like this developer is not side by side with our team, are kind of going away, or they already have gone away. So that's going to be like the new normal, is that we have distributed teams that may never even meet each other face to face, by 2031. So I think that's going to be common. Our customers in 2031, I think they're going to be very nimble. They're going to be very optimal about utilizing the elastic models of the public cloud. And in my case, I like to prefer to refer to the promised land as a combination of on-prem and public cloud or hybrid cloud, where I tell people that public cloud is nice, but it's kind of like living in a hotel. It's like, hey, it's pretty good for a week, but after you get fresh towels and free cable, but after a month, you're like, damn, this is really adding up here. So what can we do to optimize that? And maybe we just burst the public cloud providers when we need additional capacity. Otherwise, we host it ourselves. So I think you're going to see really optimized architectures for the elasticity of workloads, and people being very nimble. We're kind of, the DevOps movement is kind of over the hurdle, and things are getting a lot easier. So I think it's going to be common for multiple updates per day, constant changing of applications and new features and things that are going to be coming out at a much faster rate than they are now.
That's really interesting that you should mention that, because I talked to a couple of other cloud providers before, and they're all like looking at the same sort of thing. So it's like there was such a drive to go full cloud, right? And now people are saying, there's a bit of pushback on that, because it's just the economics are just not there, right? Is that what that's what you're telling me?
That's right. Especially after you're there for any amount of time and you start leveraging the different fabric in the ecosystem. And metered and paper for what you use is great. It just starts to suck when you use a lot. So,
Yeah.
and so as a startup with like no ops and serverless model, it's great. And as the company grows and you went from 10 to 500 people and you're all in there, that's going to be challenging, because then you're kind of locked in and made choices back when you said it didn't matter what would happen 10 years from now, and like, here we are. And so we had similar things in working in the games, where we would make decisions that says, if this is a problem 10 years from now, we'll be in a good position. we're not going to worry about that.
Yeah.
Star Wars: The Old Republic just recently hit the 10-year mark, right? So it's just like,
And it's still going strong too.
Still going strong. That's right.
So you weren't able to replicate that success, right? Because it's damn good.
That was a damn good one. The degrees of success or games is always kind of debatable. The other ones I worked on, I don't know if you played, were Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah.
I worked on Anthem. I was a technical director for Anthem, which was
Nice.
the most recent BioWare game. But yeah, I worked on a handful of BioWare titles and then helped out some other EA studios with some of their games too.
So is it hard to get into the gaming industry?
Yes, and it's very hard, and in some cases, it's even harder to get out. And so,
Really?
let's talk about the getting in first. As a pure non-gaming career guy, enterprise software, started in petroleum, what would they do with somebody like me, right? But I had, when I interviewed, there was a very charismatic leader named Gordon Walton, and he was interested in problem solvers. So, I didn't even know it was an interview. It was a shotgun interview over a lunch where I thought we were going to be talking about, Oracle performance optimization. And
Right.
It turned out that the Oracle guy invited other people to this. And then Gordon said, well, we're actually here to talk to you about working at BioWare and making some games. And I said, well, guys, I appreciate the lunch, but we can cut this short right now. I'm not a gamer, really no interest. I'd rather read a book than play a video game. So, no interest. And then he very strategically would say, do you like solving problems? Yes. Another question. He got like 8 or 9 yeses in a row, right? 2 weeks later, I was in the gaming industry.
Nice.
So from Gordon's perspective, which I think is one that I've tried to follow, he was like, I got enough people that have been doing games their whole life. I need some different ways of thinking about stuff and solving some hard problems. So that's the hard part to get in, hard way to get in. It's hard. Getting out, and by the way, when you're there, I am convinced in my career that the game developers are the best programmers on the planet. The problems that they have to deal with on latency issues and really creative solutions to complicated problems, there's no other that I've seen. And there might be some in pharma or whatever. But the problem is when you try to get out, if you can imagine if you worked on games, even though let's say you were doing things in cloud and DevOps and microservices that are pretty ubiquitous and apply to any industry, the fact that you're gaming, what would PayPal do with you? Or what would Citibank need with a gaming programmer? So you would have to have a leader or a hiring manager that says, no, these people are really, really talented. If we could focus them on our domain, let's talk to them because I would like to have some of that engineering talent on my team. But that is a rare viewpoint, I can tell you that.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, gaming is actually really, really intense when you think about what you need to do to put that together. And like you said, with the latency issues and all of that, it is one of the highest you need a higher level of skill to be able to work in that space.
And then you work, you sweat for 7 years making a game and some really killer weeks, and you feel really good. And then within 10 minutes of the game going live, the first post on Reddit is this game's terrible. You're like, oh my
God. It's almost like being an artist, right? I mean, you're
and I'm sure it's like some 11-year-old that just doesn't like the game because it took so long to get it or whatever. But it's actually powerful when there are millions of people that use your product and service, and that that are like, this is the greatest thing ever. That is pretty powerful, and that's why I worked there for over 10 years. Was that kind of drug that I would get by people saying that I play your game every night, and I met my wife playing your game, and we love it, and what's coming next, and keep up the good work, and then you're like, okay, it was worth it.
Nice. So did getting into the industry turn you into a gamer?
I did a little bit. So, prior to that, I think Crash Bandicoot was like the only thing I'd ever played. That was because I had kids and I had an Xbox and stuff, right? But it was like, Crash Bandicoot and maybe some other titles like that. And
Yeah.
I liked Crash Bandicoot. I thought it was pretty cool. Well done. But then getting into some of the role-playing games and things like BioWare is known for, that was like, I never played like Dungeons and Dragons. So Dragon Age was like a big step for me to get over, right? Big hurdle, even though it has a cult-like following. But yeah, and then I started playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, which was to get good. Even though I was on the engineering and the programming side, it was very critical that I learned enough about the game that would help me in my job. And so I did, whether or not it was like about how do we create a guild system, or how do players in different parts of the world communicate, even though they're on different language servers, stuff like that. It's no substitute to not play the game. I had to play the game.
Yeah.
And like they make them where they're addictive, and so that happened to me too. And
Yeah.
that's easy to happen. But what a fun industry that gives a lot of joy and entertainment to a lot of people.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And are there any particular lessons that you learned in gaming that would be useful elsewhere?
Oh yeah, many. Let's see. Well, there's a lot of things in gaming that do apply to every industry. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's probably the most player or customer focused industry that I've been a part of. And one of the reasons for that is it's so easy for them to provide feedback in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
And we would scrutinize the constructive or critical feedback because, like it or not, they were right. This part of the game's too easy. This part of the game's too hard. Whatever. But really having that, there was no shortage of feedback. So that was a good thing. And so in other areas, any product that you're making in any industry, if you can get a feedback loop like that, combined with like the ability to make changes quickly, you're golden. So that's another one. The other thing in gaming, it's a lot of work and impact on your personal life at the end of it that is really takes a toll. So that was one of my takeaways, is that as a professional, I would have to set limits on the amount of time I'm either working or playing the game, because you get to the point where it's a big blur, and the next thing you know, you're like, I haven't seen my kid in 2 weeks. What am I doing? It's getting away from me.
Yeah. Crunch time happens all the time, right? It's like crunch time is like constant.
That was a big takeaway. And my other takeaway was that there are non-technical solutions to technical problems that are in front of our faces every day, that we be more creative about doing something differently than adopting a whole new infrastructure or complicated technologies to solve a problem. And I'll give you a short story on that, which was the Anthem launch. And so, here you are, you've been working on this thing for a long time, and everything is a crescendo up into the opening and the launch of the game, which was February 21st at 8 a.m. Central Time, right? So what happens is the EA marketing machine gets on that, and they're like, commercials, they're in Super Bowl, they're really marketing this thing, right? So as a technologist, you're going, don't do that, stop doing that. We're going to have so many people show up at the start of this that we're going to fall over. Well, you've load tested and load tested and load tested to the point where you feel pretty confident, but there's no substitute for game day, and things can go wrong, right? And so the solution was a very non-technical one, is that the game was going to be live at 8 o'clock in the morning, and at 4 o'clock a.m. with no approval from corporate EA, we just opened the gates. And so instead of having this massive onslaught at 8 o'clock, we had more of a gradual ramp. And those gradual ramps in and engineering are what we want because things can scale up, they can catch up, but they just can't handle that initial onslaught out of the gate without over provisioning and wasting a lot of hardware and stuff like that. So we caught a little flack for that, but it was well worth the fact that we had a smooth launch when we did it, because that was the key. We just opened the doors earlier, and then on social media the gamers start talking, Anthem's up, and then we got our ramp.
I was going to say, you have all those people hitting F5 going, when's it up, when's it up, when's it up? Okay, it's up. You didn't even have to leak it. It just like went up there.
And we had the monitoring in place where we could tell how many people were knocking at the door. And they started like 9 o'clock the night before. So we could see this crowd gathering. And so that was one of my bigger takeaways, is that, you know, sometimes just thinking about it differently is a good solution to the problem and a lot less headaches. Now, I could, if we would have asked EA Marketing, can we please open, you know, 4 hours before you said, the answer would have been no.
Yeah.
So, you know, this was kind of like the Maverick side, and, you know, there was small impact to that, but overall, it was a way to go at the end of the day.
Oh yeah, no, that's very smart, very smart. Well, it's been great talking with you. This is fantastic. So, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Dmoore, DMOORE at wearegap.com, and please feel free to reach out to me about anything that we talked about in this session, or cloud, or serverless, or DevOps, or all those things are kind of in my wheelhouse that I've been focusing on. So it was great to meet you, Chris. I really enjoyed our hour.
Great meeting with you too. And I'll put your bio and your LinkedIn bio and everything in the show notes so everyone can get directly connected to you. So thank you, sir. It was great talking with you.
Thanks,
Talk to you
Chris.
later. Bye.